Uh, hey everybody, and welcome to our interview with EFT great stars, I would say. And today we have somebody that we had to talk with Brett Yates to get to, and this is
Brad's a dear friend.
yes, and this is dear Dr. Peta Stapleton, who working on EFT about 25 years or something.
Yeah.
And she have a lot of experience. She's registered as clinical and health psychologist in the state of Queensland, and this year she was called psychologist #1. And this is the great victory of EFT, because some psychologists do not recognize EFT, and now we hope that it will help world to uh, give more attention to this technique. And also she wrote a book, Science Behind Tapping, that is very interesting, and we hope to translate this book into Russian. And Peta Stapleton worked with government, and she have experience of working with Slovenian government on educational system, and this is actually our topic today too. So, but first, Peta, how you met tapping in your life?
Yes. So I do talk about it a little bit in my book that has just come out. I wasn't
Mhm.
looking for anything weird, like our listeners will know, and if they know Brad's work, obviously tapping is very different to traditional talk therapy and tapping on these acupressure
Yes,
points.
yes.
And I wasn't trying to kind of find something strange, but I was
Mhm.
unhappy with the current treatments. I was working with eating disorder patients. So they had like
Mhm.
anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, things like that. And a lot of the mainstream things weren't working. So this was over 20 years ago. So I was
Mhm.
complaining to a friend,
Mhm.
complaining that I'd done all this training at university and nothing was working. And
Mhm.
he said, I've come across this strange kind of therapy approach and maybe it'll work. I had no idea, Pavel, what he was talking about. Nothing. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't know what planet you're on. And
Mhm.
it was a couple of weeks later, he was at a group I was running, and a young girl had a panic attack. So she started to hyperventilate in the group, and he took her outside just to help her calm down. And at the end of the night, she came back. She was really calm. And I said to him, what did you do? Like, did you give her some Valium, some medication? He said, no, I did
You mean
tapping.
drugs?
Yeah, drugs. And he said, no, I did that tapping thing I was trying to tell you about. So because I'd seen her come back so calm, I guess was a bit more open, and I said, okay, you need to tell me what this is. And of course, he
Mm.
explained it. I experienced it. We went off and did trainings, and kind of the rest is
And when
history. Yeah.
when you experienced it, did you go then to Gary Craig? Did you met him and all that stuff? Did you
So
study from him?
I did. I did study from him. He had some trainers here in Australia. So we didn't at the time go to America, but Gary was running all the trainings. So there were
Mhm.
trainers here locally who we went to, and
Mhm.
they'd been trained directly by him. Over the next couple of years, I did kind of have contact with Gary just because we were doing some research. But it was around that
Mhm.
time that he started to think about retirement, and he gifted, obviously, the EFT branding to
Mhm.
the world, copyright, and Dawson Church suddenly appeared. And then I got
Mhm.
this phone call from Dr. Dawson Church, and I had no idea
Mhm.
of he was. Of course,
Mhm.
now he's a great friend, but he's
Mhm.
like, oh, I believe you're doing some research. And I'm like, who are you? Not knowing he'd
Mhm.
taken over from Gary Craig.
Mhm.
So we learnt from Gary back in the beginning.
And what else did you study? Not that panic attacks, but something. If you have a, like you have data, that
Yes, yeah,
data
what
like
we've done.
scientific data.
Mm,
What kind of data do you
yeah.
have?
So, what we were looking at in the beginning were food cravings in people who were
Mm.
overweight or obese, because we do have an obesity issue here in Australia. So, we taught people how to use tapping, and we've now got thousands and thousands of those
Mm.
people that
Mm.
learnt to reduce their food cravings to nothing with tapping, and then
Mm.
over time they lose weight. So we've published, just had recently accepted a 2-year follow-up. So 2 years later, people don't get their food cravings back.
In what
That
year it happened?
we
In
started
what
that
year?
Yeah, so the first publication was 2011, 10, 11. So we've been
Mm-hmm.
publishing since then in that area. And we've looked at things like cigarette smoking, clinical
Mm-hmm.
depression,
Mm-hmm.
school performance in high school students who are studying, their
Mm-hmm.
performance anxiety and worry. We've done lots of
Mm-hmm.
things now. So we
And
started in the food
if
space. Yeah.
yes, so if it's official in scientific studies, so they must have articles, and you have special numbers of them, and you have a special website where everybody can watch and see it. What's
Yes.
the name
So,
of?
yes, if people go to my website, just www.peta stapleton.com,
Mm-hmm.
they can access all that kind of thing. And my research page at the university is linked there, so they can see everything that we've published. We're up to here,
Mm-hmm.
we've published probably a good 40 studies now in
Mm-hmm.
academic journals on EFT, and worldwide there's about 140 that are published. So there's quite a few.
And what's the names of these journals that your
Oh,
articles are published?
yes. Yeah, lots of things. So, the Journal of Clinical Psychology, things like Health and Wellbeing is a journal, eating disorder journals, those types of things,
Mm-hmm.
obesity journals, also things like complementary and alternative medicine
Mm-hmm.
is a journal. So, we try to pick journals that rate in our
I
academic world really high.
Yes, I heard about journal called Science. Do you know that journal?
Yes, yeah, yep.
Have you been published there?
No, not in science, but we have got
Uh-huh.
a similar meditation study about to be published, and it will go into one of those
Uh-huh.
neuroscience journals. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what's a basic issue in food craving, for instance? Maybe you have special statistic that top issue, top
Yep.
reason for this. What
For
is
it
it?
working, anxiety. So,
Yeah.
the biggest thing about food cravings or addiction in general, so cigarette
Uh-huh.
smoking, we've done too,
Uh-huh.
is anxiety. So when
Uh-huh.
people tap on the anxious feeling of a food craving, the craving goes away, but so does their anxiety. So that's why we believe tapping works so well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what you wrote in your Science Behind Tapping book? What kind of issues, data,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
scientific
let me show
measurement?
everybody. I have got a copy here, so
Ah,
we'll have a quick
yes,
look. So that one's
yes.
Hay House, and
Uh-huh.
we are talking about trying to have it translated into Russian because they are
Yeah.
selling different language rights. But that's
Uh-huh.
everywhere, and it's Kindle as well. So if people want it online, they can just jump on and download it.
Uh-huh.
So I took all of the research that was worldwide in tapping EFT and
Mm-hmm.
made it easy to understand in separate chapters. So
Mm-hmm.
there's one chapter on post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a chapter on just children and studies on children, a chapter on things like pain. So I took all of them and just condensed them and separated them so it was easy for people to read. But I also included all of case studies of real people who had been through it, and so they tell their story. So it's actually really designed for anybody to be able to read. I mean, you might be a
Uh-huh.
health professional, but you might be someone who just has done tapping from Brad's YouTube videos and you want to know,
Yes.
oh,
And
what's behind this.
how many people in general you have in this book? Like 2,000, 5,000
Oh,
people, or two or
wow.
three people?
Do you know, I haven't counted that up, but if I guessed across all the research that I talk about and all the people that
Uh-huh.
went through trials, it would be in the thousands. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
case studies in there in a bit more depth, but thousands, because lots of our clinical trials have hundreds of people in them. So it's not unusual to have 200 people or 200
Mm-hmm.
students or 300. So when you add them all together, yeah, thousands, 10,000. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I'll have to count
Great.
them up.
Yes.
I haven't done that.
uh, and I heard about the cortisol level in the blood, but what
Yeah.
else did you measure? What else did you study there?
Yeah, so we have done cortisol. We are at the moment, we're about to start a new trial where we're going to measure heart rate variability, and Dawson Church has done some of that. Things like blood pressure have been measured, but there's
Mhm.
been gene changes measured, so DNA changes. So there's been 3 studies published where they looked at DNA in the body that changes after
How did
tapping.
How did you measure
How do you
that?
do that? You do that through a blood test. So a
Uh-huh.
blood test that creates a copy of DNA, and then we can investigate to see.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
and
what
we're
changes
looking at
happens?
EEG changes too. So DNA changes, yes. So
Yes, DNA.
the biggest changes there have been seen with stress genes. So genes responsible for stress that
Uh-huh.
in one particular study that looked at war veterans, 6 genes associated with stress changed their expression, which meant the person didn't feel any of those PTSD symptoms. And 6 months later, the gene hadn't gone back to the way it was. So it was still, like we like to say, it was sort of not expressing itself, meaning it was there, but it's not giving you any symptoms. You're just calm. So it lasts over
I mean,
time.
do you mean that sequence of all these acids changes while they tap?
Yeah, so it's about, to simplify it, we talk about the gene has the ability to be a certain way, but it has to have
Mm.
something that helps it express or not express itself. And
Yes, yes.
tapping appears to suppress that for a lot of the negative types of expressions, so stress,
Mm.
poor immune system, cancer, that kind of thing. And just 1 hour of tapping in another study showed 72 genes changed just after 1 hour of tapping. 72 genes. So that study is in my
You
book.
mean reading of this gene? I studied a little bit of biology, so I would say
Yeah.
that I see this as a big sequence, and
Yep.
sometimes some like 15% of this sequence read, and not more. So you you mean that another genes they not read, but they still
Yeah,
exist in a sequence,
they
or
still
you
exist,
change?
but yeah, they're not lit up. They're not being
Yeah.
read. That's exactly right. So the body gets a different physical and psychological experience if there's a gene that's not sort of,
Mm.
expressing or lighting up.
What
Yeah.
else? Yes, and what else?
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? Uh, Data and
Normalizes,
changes.
yes. So we're about to do some more, but we've got a lot of study that exists on EEG changes. So the brain waves in the brain that, associated
Mm.
with different thinking states or calm and things like that, radically change. So there's things like claustrophobia, where people are frightened of small spaces. Just a
Mm.
couple of hours of tapping allows the brain to change its EEG kind of
Mm.
brainwave state. So we're doing some of that. We've got a cancer trial that's actually coming up. We start late this year, where we're actually going to measure. We're tapping for these cancer patients going through treatment to cope with chemotherapy, but we'll be measuring their EEG brainwave state as they're in tapping with a group. So there's some exciting things. There's so many things. Pain. We've looked at chronic pain. We've looked at how tapping lasts over time with pain.
You
Yeah.
know that about cancer markers or something like that in the blood.
Yep.
So like chemist, they do in chemists, and then they measure cancer markers, and they
Yes.
go less. Do
Yes.
you do the same with tapping?
We will. The first stage of our study is to look at psychological well-being. The second stage of the study, which will be next year, we'll look at cancer biomarkers. I think that will be quite what's the right word? It's quite cutting edge to be out there looking at how tapping might affect cancer biomarkers. So we're
Uh,
going to take it in a two-step approach. One, look at psychological well-being, coping better with
mm,
nausea. But two, we absolutely have the ability here to measure those cancer biomarkers. Yeah.
so you keep up doing it, and everything will be published on your website, so
Yes. Yes.
we can look up.
Yeah.
That is great.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of variants of tapping. What kind of tapping do you use in your studies?
So what we've done, and as a research world, so Dawson Church in America and colleagues in the UK, is we all try to test just one type of tapping, which is the clinical EFT tapping, which is just side of the hand and then starting at the eyebrow, going through to the top of the head, just the 8 points. So that's all
Mm.
we do, is just the standard. We don't do any of the eye movements from the 9 gamut. And what we're trying to do there is show people that the basic version of EFT absolutely works. And then
Mm.
if there's variations, and there are lots of variations, people can Google them,
Yes.
we can understand how they work as well then, because we know that the foundation works. So we're all committed to just
Uh-huh.
testing clinical EFT.
Yes. And what about Slovenia experience? What happened there?
Yeah, so that was colleagues over there that are part of EFT International. So they led, we have a teacher training that is online, available to anybody worldwide. And that
Mm,
sparked an interest in schools
mm,
wanting to train their teachers. And we've had lots of schools around Australia and overseas do tapping in the classroom. But colleagues in the UK particularly had some, I guess, colleagues in Slovenia where they convinced the government or the education system to fund 75% of the training fee for all teachers, right through from the little kindergarten prep right through to the end of high school, to be
you
trained in
mean
EFT
75% of
of the
official
fee.
teachers?
No, so all teachers are eligible, but the training fee would be funded by the government up 75% of the fund of the training fee. So if the
Uh,
fee was $100, the government would pay $75 of that for them to train
mm,
in EFT. So they wouldn't be out of pocket very much. And so everybody is allowed to go and train in tapping and use it in their
mm.
classrooms, which is based on EFT International's um, their particular training program.
Yes, and how many teachers took part of
I,
Slovenia?
as far as I know, it is ongoing. So they're actually allowed. It wasn't a project. It is an ongoing project. So
Mm,
teachers, when they hear about it, and we let everybody know in case they've got family and friends, they can
mhm,
keep accessing it. So I might try and find out how many have been through that process. But it was only
mm.
2 years ago that it all got approved. So it's ongoing. Any teachers
Ah,
over there, it's
do they
quite a
study
landmark.
online? Do they study online from
No,
you?
I believe they go in person. So trainers go to the country. Yeah, and they use all our
Ah,
research and
you mean,
things like that to
uh,
keep.
somebody from England, you mean? Like who?
Yes, yes. So colleagues from England to go over there. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So maybe you have some something interesting from heard from Slovenia, from Slovenian schools or from Slovenian teachers.
Certainly, we've heard from lots of schools. So, our particular program has also gone everywhere as well. So, ours is all online. So, our tapping in the classroom, it's easier for a lot of teachers online. So, people can have a look, and the first module is free. But an example that it is impacting is with some of the school shootings in America that have happened, particularly
Mm,
the one in Florida in Parkland, which was about 18 months ago. They
mm,
took on the local mayor there, the leader of the area, decided
mm.
they would train everyone in my program for teachers. So they've put 45 teachers through our tapping in the
You mean
classroom.
May 2019 or
No, last
2012?
year. Yeah, no, there was one 2018 in
Uh-huh.
Florida. So since
Uh,
then, they've been training teachers in tapping so that because a lot of those students don't want to go back to school because of obviously the fear and things like that. So the fact that those local governments are paying
mm,
for it for all their teachers and we keep sending back. I've got a colleague who goes and does that for me. I mean, we're creating a ripple effect here that's come out of Slovenia and here and now in Australia, where all these teachers, it's just normal. They're learning how to do tapping and they're teaching it.
and kids there make a lot of tests. So do you have tests
Yeah,
measurements like
yeah,
kids get better or
yeah, yep,
tests in math and or their language or some
yes,
subjects getting
yeah.
better? Do you have such results?
Yes, so teachers will often keep a track of their test results, like mathematics exam tests or improvement in English. They keep track of that. We go in and we measure their things like their fears. So have they got test anxiety? We measure that and we see changes in that. We measure
Mhm.
things like their resilience, their self-esteem, things like their
And
strengths.
what percentage do
Yeah,
you have?
what we're showing is that we've done one study, it's published. We're
Uh-huh.
205 students and
Uh-huh.
all of them had improvements and kept those improvements 1 year later. So they all
Mhm.
improved in all those things, self-esteem, their fears, their strengths improved, difficulties dropped off. They all improved and the teachers told us their grades improved as well. So they measured that and we measured all the other stuff. And it
You
lasts.
mean
It lasts over
uh,
time. Yeah.
yes, and I mean maybe you have some standard figure that 20% growing of the mathematic exams or 50%. How much?
Yeah, that particular one off the top of my head, I can't remember. Sometimes we do measure that, so we can tell that, they had a 65% reduction in food cravings and things like that when we measure that. That particular study, we didn't look at that. What we looked at was, did the improvement occur in 6 weeks? And it did statistically.
Mm-hmm.
And then a year later, was it still improved? And the answer is it was, meaning
Mm-hmm.
at a statistical number level, it doesn't drop back like with
Mm-hmm.
time. It lasts, so the brain does shift and change after tapping, and it stays like that in the new way, which is
Mm-hmm.
what we've been trying to show for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm completely exhausted with questions, and we can cut off this moment.
Sure.
Maybe you want me to ask you something very interesting that you would like to share.
We've covered quite a lot of and then our new cancer trial. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I've been talking about lately in other interviews. Uh, no, you could ask me, what does it mean that I got named Psychologist of the Year? And I could just say a little bit of what that means for EFT, and then maybe we could cut that in, and that can probably be the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can put it in the beginning or
Yeah.
mix
Yeah.
answers. So, Peter, what does it mean for you to be named psychologist #1 and be recognized as a psychologist?
Yes, I was quite stunned when that news came through. So that is for Australia. So the Allied Health Organization decided they would make me the
Mhm.
Psychologist of the Year for this year. But what that means is they've actually recognized all of the EFT, because that's what I'm known for, all of the EFT research and all our clinical trials and publications, which is very different to what we teach at a mainstream level in psychology. And I do teach the master's students here. So they're
Mhm.
actually recognizing that tapping is valid, it is a game changer, and it may
Mhm.
well be creating some sort of disruption out there, but they've recognized it with this. So I was more excited that it was EFT that got recognized. I just happened to be the person flying the flag.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah.
And as you know their approaches, as you know their results, what can you forecast maybe in next 5 years or in next 10 years in the world of psychology and in the world?
Yeah, good
So
question.
what changes can it bring?
I'm going to be bold here and really go out on a limb and say I actually believe that EFT tapping will be taught in schools, but taught at university level to our students so that they learn it as a main skill that they'll use with their clients. And I absolutely believe it'll be covered by our medical system. So at the moment, it's not covered for the government to pay for sessions as such,
Mhm.
but I do believe it'll get government recognition in the next 5 to 10 years. I can absolutely see it. We've seen it with EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy has been accepted and recognized, and I think EFT is the next thing.
Mhm. And in what governments? You mean England government, United Kingdom government,
Yeah,
Australia,
I would
United
say,
States,
yeah, I
Europe,
would
or all
absolutely
over the
say
world?
all over. I would say that when America leads it, Australia follows, and England is in there as well. So when you have those three, we've already had one of the English, so the British National Institute of Clinical Excellence has actually accepted EFT. So they're a
Mhm.
research body that fund research. They have accepted EFT. So that happened late last year. So I think when those big countries happen, all of the other ones do tend to, in Europe, tend to follow.
Mhm.
Australia likes to wait for America to make a move. So as soon as they make the move, we'll be right.
Do you have ambassadors in Cambridge, Oxford, and another great
Uh,
universities?
Harvard, we've had one at Harvard
Yeah.
University, although he is retiring. There are a couple, like there's a couple of other universities. There's a big university in England where there's some ambassadors, and we do research with them as well. I'm probably the ambassador here in Australia. Yeah, we need a couple of other big names like Stanford University or Yale, but we
Mhm.
have had. There's 2 psychiatrists at Harvard who absolutely support EFT tapping, have published on it as well. So they've been really good supporters.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And maybe usually in interview the great thing is stories, like story of
Yeah.
some change. Maybe you have story, one more story like
Yeah.
something amazing story?
Yeah, let me think. Do you want any particular area of people that we've worked with? Any particular thing that might be important in Russia at the
Some
moment? Even
um,
anything people cope
maybe
with?
about uh, persuasion of your, like how your study worked to persuade
Ah,
people who were
yeah.
very skeptical.
Yeah, okay, yes. I'm thinking of, so we always run group treatment. So we have 15 adults that come in, so they're all there. So I've got thousands of stories in my head. But there was one particular person, a male gentleman, who I think got dragged along with his wife. So she was coming, so she made him come. And they were coming to learn how to lose weight with tapping and food cravings.
Mm,
But he was very skeptical. And we don't worry too much about if you're skeptical, because when you start tapping, it actually bypasses and still affects that part of the brain, the amygdala,
mm,
which is not conscious thought. So it actually still works, which is ironic. But this gentleman was like, no, I don't actually think, it might work for these other people because placebo effect and things like that, but I don't think it'll work. We're like, well, let's just give it a go. And he particularly had a chocolate bar. So he had a bought chocolate bar in that he was eating them every day. I said, okay, so we did the tapping on the chocolate bar and everything he liked about it. And that was all, well and good. And he was like, no, I don't feel like eating it now, but I might later. And he wanted to take it home. And even though in the moment he's like, my desire's gone away, he's like, I'm going to take
mm,
it home because I think it'll come back. And we're like, okay, well, he had 8 weeks. So he came back and he still was not convinced, but he wasn't eating the chocolate. And we were all having a bit of a laugh to ourselves. And anyway, kind of went on and didn't want to accept it, but that was okay. Anyway, about 12 months later, he contacted me and he said, you won't believe it, I forgot about that chocolate bar. And his wife saw a TV ad and the chocolate bar was on there. And she's like, oh, you haven't had one of those since the tapping trial. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go and buy one, because he wanted to disprove that it worked, even though he hadn't had one. So he goes out and he buys this chocolate bar. And he says he starts to eat it at home, and it was so dry and unappealing in his mouth that after 2 bites he had to spit it out, and he threw it out. And he had to send me this email to say, yeah, okay, I think it worked. Like a year later. So it's just gold when they get in contact with you and let you know that. Like, I've got another we did a school trial where we taught 15-year-olds how to eat healthy vegetables and fruit. So not so much the junk food, but how to eat. Anyway, it was about halfway through the 6-week program, and a mother emails the school principal, and they'd given permission for their children to be in the trial, but said, I don't know what you're doing to my son, but he just came home and said, can I have cauliflower for dinner? And she thought, that's a vegetable. She just thought, this is fantastic, because he'd never come home and asked for vegetables for dinner. So that principal sent me the email, and that's really lovely. I think now, even with social media, is people let us know down the
yeah.
track how they're going, and they forget that it was such an issue, or they're suddenly surprised. It's amazing. That's what amazes me more than anything.
Yes, and I see one of your specialties is adolescence, and maybe you have special cases, like you have something to add about work with teenagers and the
Yeah,
kids, how
yeah,
to approach to them, how to show tapping to them, and how
yeah.
to involve uh, teenagers and young people.
Yeah, and they are sometimes a little bit more tricky. Like, young children are very easy. We might use a teddy bear and a puppet or things like that, and they just readily accept tapping and do it. Teenagers start to get a little bit skeptical. So we always suggest that, tell stories of other teenagers that may have used it and for something similar. So I wrote a book called EFT for Teens. Hay House
Mm,
published that, and you can just find that online and download it, read it. But it's all
mm,
teenage stories. So it's all the teenagers in their case studies. So it's just a nice little short book. But we
mm,
always ask a teenager what they would like to change in their life. So even if they come into therapy for a different reason, we say, what would you like to be different in your life? Because they'll always pick something more important to themselves. And it might be, you know, relationship with my girlfriend at school that no one knows I have, or actually I want to get on with my dad better, or something like that. So we always start with what they choose, and then we just sort of casually sort of say, look, there's this technique, it's a bit weird, we kind of know that it actually helps stress in the body. Do you want to give it a go? Look, if it doesn't work, we'll find something else, but why don't we give it a go? So we're always really casual, because when we kind of go, look, if it doesn't work, don't worry about it, but why don't we give it a go and see what happens? They often will go, all right, I'll humor you and I'll give it a go, you know. And then of course, once you get into it and they get a shift, then they go, actually, yeah, I feel different now, or I feel more relaxed, or wow, how does that work? And they'll then want to know. So we just always say with teenagers, come in very gently and slowly and very casually. And I'm kind of, you know, known to sort of go, oh, look, if it works, great. But if it doesn't, don't worry. We know it's always going to work. But it's very casual, so that they don't feel like I'm coming in sort of saying, oh, there's this amazing thing and, you know, it works for everybody, and, you know, it kind of takes that pressure off. So yeah, we help them with everything from obviously schoolwork to peer relationships to bullying, but sporting, athletic goals. A lot of young boys that we work with do have sporting achievement goals, but they have, you know, maybe they have some sort of block, or they have a worry about an injury that hasn't healed, and that's their worry. So there's always something. So it's really cool just to pick what they want to do, and tell them other stories and just give it a go. Because once it works, they tell their friends, and then their friends come and go, oh, so blah, blah, came and saw you for, you know, tapping. Can you teach me that? And I go, sure. Yeah.
Did you work with professional sportsmen? Do you have big names of sportsmen who use tapping?
We do here in Australia, and funnily enough, there are a couple of quite well-known, like Australia-wide football players. One of them is retiring this year, and his mother is a tapping coach, and she's trained with me, and she taught him tapping 10 years ago, and he's been using it, and we have video footage of him using it on the football field. But he's retiring this year, and he's writing a book, and he's writing about tapping for the first time. So he wants us to wait till the book comes out, and then he's going to talk about how he used tapping for the last 10 years of his career.
And how results grown up due to tapping?
Well, every time he tapped, their team won. So, you know, he just, but his mum taught him tapping, and I taught her. So it kind of goes like that. But we've got a couple, a couple of sports stars.
What else than football? You know, maybe some other sports.
Golf. So we have golf players. Yeah, golf.
Do you think Tiger Woods used tapping?
I don't know. I don't know. We have got golf here. We actually have someone here locally who specializes in teaching tapping for golf players, because they get that mental block stuff as well. So we have actually a specialty kind of thing here. Golf, swimming. So we actually have someone in our Olympic swimming locally who knows tapping and teaches it just when it's needed for athletes, again, overcoming some of that stuff. So yeah, it pops up a lot in athletics. In America, they've done it for basketball teams, like college level, and baseball. So there's actually some interviews that are on my YouTube channel. You can have a look at baseball players that use tapping for the World Series and things like that. So just go to my YouTube. Yeah.
I think some people who are interested in sports watching us now, and maybe you have some tips for them how to tap on sports achievements.
Yeah. So it's always about using tapping for anything that's getting in the road of you achieving. So that sometimes is a worry, sometimes a feeling of anxiousness or nervousness. So you can tap on any of those, but maybe it's a belief. Sometimes people have limiting beliefs, and you can use tapping on beliefs with sporting things. It might be, oh, this is as good as I'm going to get. Like, that's a belief. Or actually, that didn't work last time, so it's not going to work this time. Those kind of things. So anything physical as an emotion, but also anything at a belief level. I say to people, write down all the reasons you won't achieve your goal. So if they've got a sporting goal, write down all the reasons you won't achieve it. They are all the things you have to tap on. So that becomes your tapping list. Yeah. Yeah.
And what about at some point switching to positive or something, like, you know, it's a lot big theme how to tap right, and when we trying to achieve something, do we need to switch from like trauma and stoppers, switch to something positive, or we can just stay on negative tapping, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of people like to do some positive, and they can do it every single time they tap, just at the end of what they've tapped on. So it's a nice way to finish the process sometimes. So you may
Mm,
have tapped on your stress or your worry or your negative, whatever it is that's getting you upset. And then when you feel calmer, just finish with a round of tapping with more positive words. And you might use words like, now I feel calm, or now I'm going to have a great day. Now I'm focused and motivated,
mm,
whatever it is. So just do 1 or 2 rounds at the end of your tapping session with positive words to sort of complete the process, if you like. And some people
mm,
really like that. Others don't worry because they feel calm, the worry's over, and they just get on with their day. But often,
mm,
even young children, they like it at the end if you just sort of, okay, well, let's do some tapping now on, I was worried about that, but now I feel good and I'm going to have a great day. And you can just finish with
uh-huh,
some rounds of tapping. We just say, don't do the positive tapping first, because it's a bit like a band aid where if there's any worry underneath, the worry will still be there. Doing a positive tapping without acknowledging your worry won't make it go away. It'll just put a band-aid over it. So that's the only thing we
uh,
say about positive tapping.
mm. Did you do special studies on positive tapping, or
Not
you just
We just add it at the end of all of our bits. So we
uh,
teach every trial that we run, we teach them positive tapping, but they learn to not do it unless they've got themselves in a calm state. So they just learn, okay, I do my tapping on my stress first, and then I can do my positive tapping. So we haven't done studies just on positive tapping because I don't think any of us
mm,
believe it'll actually work on its own. We need to
mm,
clear out what's going on first.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe something else came to your mind because we finishing our interview, and maybe uh, Peter, what would you like to do for Russians in Russia and to come with what would you like to come? Maybe to work with our psychologists and to show them
Yeah.
and talk with them on their language
Yeah.
or something.
Yes, yeah, I would love that, psychologists worldwide, Russia included, engage and embrace. I call these fourth wave approaches. So, third wave was cognitive behavioral therapy and everything that we've learned there. But the fourth wave is the body based, and I'd love, and I train psychologists here in Australia where it is a little bit different. We're teaching them more how to work with a client than we are on themselves. But for psychologists in Russia to be open minded enough, read the book, realize, oh, there is actually evidence and research out there, and
Mm,
go and learn, whether it's, they go and learn or we come to you, to stay open. That's sort of the one line, I guess, that I'm coming back to all the time for people. I'm like, if you've never heard of it or it's the first time you've started looking at it, just stay open. Uh, Even though you might have different beliefs about different things, just stay open to see what would happen. And that's the one
uh,
thing that I was open enough that after that girl had the panic attack in my group, that my colleague said, can I tell you about tapping now? And I went, okay, tell me. And have a look
uh,
at the rest of my life, like the whole last 20 years. If I had said, no, that's ridiculous, I don't know what I'd be doing. So yeah, I would love to. Brad has told me how fantastic his trip was, how much
uh,
of a great time he had. So
yes, thanks
I have to
to
come
Alex. He
back.
made
Alex did, yeah.
he made it, and
Yeah.
maybe some psychology students watching you now, and maybe they
Yeah.
would like to go to America, to Australia, or to
Yep.
Great Britain to
Yeah.
make their PhD on tapping. Do
Absolutely.
they
We do
have?
that. Yeah. We do
Do you
that.
have such
So
programs?
we do. So I supervise for PhDs. I've had quite a few that do EFT for their PhDs. England, same. America, the same. There's universities everywhere where we will supervise. So
Uh,
that's absolutely, they just have to go through the normal process of applying and chatting and things like that. So they can
so
absolutely do that. We offer
can
some of
they
our,
contact you
yeah,
through your website? Yes,
yes, yeah. So just
great.
get in contact, and I've got a lot of online masterclasses on our websites too, so they can just learn a little bit more about tapping in specific areas just online if they can't travel just yet, or studying and things like that. Have a look at those because they're all based on the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great. And how many books you wrote?
I've had about five or six books. So the tapping books are science behind tapping, but EFT for teens. And then I've recently, last year, just had come out EFT for introverts. So I wrote a book with a colleague, and Hay House have got that available on their website now. So how tapping can be used for someone who's an introvert and shy and quiet and anxious, but got lots of good ideas, but shy. So that book's really for them. And I've written other books about the subconscious mind and how to change behavior at an unconscious level years ago as well. Yeah. Keep thinking of the next book. What am I going to write the next book on? I don't have time.
Alex was very interested in your Slovenian experiment. So I'm thinking, did they ask you anything that he wanted to know about that?
He
So-
hasn't. Yeah, he hasn't. That was colleagues that did that. They just used our research as the evidence more so than. So our tapping in the classroom has become an online training, whereas they go in person and train those teachers when there's the need. So ours complements that so that they can also look at the online version if they want to after they get trained. So I'm not sure what else Alex might have wanted to know.
So Peta, I'm very grateful for your work, for your promoting this theme tapping for all over the world, and I'm very happy that you give us this time and interview and warm up even more interest in this thing in Russia. Thank you very much for your share in this, and we hopefully see you in Russia and your
I would
programs.
love to. Yeah, I would love to.
Yes.
And thank you for asking. It's just a pleasure to share. And even, the internet to me is just amazing. When I did my PhD, there was no internet. So to be able to talk and share and have people hear about, a book that I wrote here in Australia or research that we do, but they're on the other side of the world, I think is just fantastic. That's the power of all this sort of technology.
Yes, as usual, I ask people to go on the description of this video, and you will see the details about Peta. So thank you very, very much, and hopefully see you.
Pleasure.
See you.
Let's make a
Yes.
date. See you
Yes.
soon. Okay.
That's it. Thank